again, for those just joining us, we're giving it a couple more minutes, just a minute or so. We're still having participants come in and log in. So bear with us and we'll be starting soon. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining. My name is Atouraya bit Younadam. I'm currently the Vice President of the Assyrian American Cultural Organization here in Arizona. Again, thank you all for joining on behalf of our organization. I know you took the time out of your day today to listen to this very important lecture. I want to get right into it. We have with us today, I will say Malfono, Abboud Zeitoune. Abboud Zeitoune was born in Qamishli, has been an active participant in the Assyrian community in Germany and around the world for over 3 decades. He has written for multiple magazines, as well as published 2 Assyrian music discography books. He joins us today to present on the unity concept of Malfono Naum Faiq. Abboud, thank you so much for joining us. I want to get right into it and start off with possibly the most important and basic of questions of who is Naum Faiq?
Yes, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Ramshochen Tawa. Thank you very much for having me with you today. Nice to meet you again, dear Atouraya, via Zoom now. Yes, just start with this your questions. I will start my desktop, so I think everybody can see it. So just for the participants who don't know who is Naum Faiq, just a short biography of Malfono Naum Faiq. He was born in 1868 in Diyarbakir. We said Amit or Omid in Assyrian, to Alias Palach and Sayyid Safar. And as you can see here, he had 1 brother, Tuma. I listed here his nephew Elias. He is important in preserving his works, by the way, but it's not the topic of today. Then he entered from 1881 till 1888 a high school which was established then by Assyrians, and there he received his education from very known teachers of that time. He became then by himself a teacher. He was teaching in different cities and villages. He traveled a lot in the Near East. As I said, he traveled to Homs, to Beirut, to Jerusalem, and many places in Dur Abdin and surroundings. In 1899, he married Lucia Khadr Shah, and from this marriage, he get at the end 2 daughters, Fahima, and they change it, they get Americanized to Fanny. The name is Fahima at the end, and Saide, Boyaji. These are their husbands. And I don't get deeper in the family structure because I have now today contact to the family of Naum Faiq from both sides. But this is a separate issue. I don't get deeper now. So most important thing for Naum Faiq is the establishing of an association in 1908, the Intibah Association, Eiruta or Eirutho. I will talk about this institution later in deep. So it's a milestone in our history, we can say, the foundation or the establishing of this association. Then he started to publish his first magazine, Kawkab Madenho, 2 years. Then in 1912, he emigrated to the USA, to New Jersey. And then he started publishing his second magazine, Beth Nahrin magazine. It's all the largest one or with the most issues published then. Then he was responsible for the Huyada or Huyoda or the Union magazine for 1 year. It was a common project of different organizations at that time. And then he deceased in the 5th of February 1930, and this is his commemoration day. Each year we celebrate all around the world. Yes, and for Naum, he was a learned man. He was able to speak, read, or write also in different languages. So as we know, Syriac, he was very fluent and very excellent in his this language. Of course, talking about Syriac, it's the classical Syriac. It's not the spoken Atouraya or Surayt we talk about. Arabic, he was also excellent in Turkish was his best or one of his excellent languages. Persian, Armenian, English, and French language. So this is a short introduction to Naum Faiq to the people who never heard about him, but we will get deeper in his thoughts, and we will see what this man thought before 120, 130 years. Yeah.
Very interesting. And that's a lot of research, I'm sure, that has gone into that. Can you tell us a little bit about what we knew in regard to his writings or the ideas that he had up to this point?
Yes, about his writings, it's, I think, I would say incredible that he stayed alive, because at the end we had for, I think, I would say for 70 years, only this book about Naum Faiq. This was a collection of speeches of his friends. After he died, they built a group to publish his works and his heritage. But at the end, it was a book of mostly speeches of his comrades and, of course, some original writings of him. And already in this stage, we see that in this book, there were some, I would say, falsifications, especially regarding the name. So always, it's mostly in Arabic, by the way, written by Murad Chaqqi in 1936. And this was the main book. If you ask people now, or till last year, of course, after my book, what did you read about Naum Faiq or from Naum Faiq, they will only have a reference to this book. So on this base, Malpana Abram Shapira wrote a book. You can see here is also the picture of Naum Faiq, but he wrote this book only as analysis of what the previous book wrote about Naum Faiq. He took the writings in Murad Chakre's book and make his analysis in comparison also with Farid Nizha. Farid Nizha is another Assyrian journalist from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so at the end, in this book of Malpana Aprem, sorry for saying that, the picture is of Naum Faiq is on the cover, but nothing about Naum Faiq, nothing new, I would say, is in the book. So one interesting book is this one. This was published in 2011. And this is the first step to print the original writings of Malfono Naum Faiq. This was published by the municipality of Diyarbakir. And here we can see the Syriac writings, Assyrian writings of Malfono Naum Faiq, Turkish, transcripted Turkish writings of Malfono Naum Faiq, and also some articles I can't read Turkish and also not Kurdish, also in Kurdish. But I can say Naum Faiq, I found only a small article in Kurdish by Malfono Naum Faiq. He mostly wrote in Ottoman Turkish and Gershuni Arabic. I will tell about that later, what this means. And of course, in Syriac. So talking about the writings of Malfono Naum Faiq, you have to know that he always, in all his writings, he used the Syriac letters for these writings. First of all, for the Syriac language. This is a sample, Ethair author, he writes here. And also for the other languages, he used the Syriac letters, in this case, Arabic, and also for the Turkish language, he used the Syriac letters for these languages. We said to them Gershuni Turkish and Gershuni Arabic. So, and this is now the what I say, the problem we have now, especially with the Ottoman Turkish. It's an old Turkish language. It's a mix of Arabic, Persian, and of course Turkish. So there are rare people who can transcript and understand this language. So this is our aim now to transcript these writings and to translate them. So his writings, I talked already about his magazine, Kawkab Madenho. This was his first magazine from 1910 till 1912. We have now access to 40 issues. I read in other sources that there were 43 issues. So if that is true, then we still miss 3 issues. Then the most important magazine, or the most important in means of the number of issues, it was Bet Nahrin magazine. Here you can say I did a statistic to the access I have to, or also we miss still some issues. You can see here that he produced one special issue for Arabic readers and one for Turkish readers at the beginning. So in the month there were two issues, one in Arabic, one in Turkish. And at the end, in his lifetime, he released around 185 issues. We have access now to around 170, I think. Also 15 till 20 issues are still missed. For example, the Syriac issue, we have here 5 numbers, but we have only number 5. Number 1 till 5, we don't have them yet. Yeah. So, and then just some words to this magazine, Intibah magazine, or Irutho. This magazine was published by his friend Gabriel Boyaji, Jabbour Boyaji, in New York, even before Kawkab Madn, even before the own magazine of Naum Faiq. And there, but we can find that still in 1909, Naum Faiq has articles there. And till the end, till 1915, we found 31 articles by Naum Faiq in this magazine. So And he was also the initiator of this magazine at the end, because Jabur Boyaji wrote that in the book of Murad Chiqe, that Naum Faiq urged him to start the publication. So, and of course, Huyodo is very known among our people. Huyodo was a very short-lived magazine, only 1 year. 39 issues were produced at that time. 38 issues, we have access to them. One of the issues is still lost. We don't have that issue. So only one chart about his books. He wrote about different topics, mostly poems. I have 2 books with poems, which became later songs. By the way, he was also the one who took music and led the youth to sing his songs. He took music from the church or from surrounding people in general. And one of the books is also, it's a lexicon with the spoken Arabic language of Diyarbakir and their roots to the Assyrian or the Syriac language. This book is, I have it in original, by the way. I had the luck, maybe a little story about how we get this material. Of course, first of all, thanks to the institution MARA, Modern Assyrian Research Archive, where they worked, it's now maybe over 10 years. They worked only in person. It's, of course, my friend Thomas Ishik or Thomas Beth Abdallah, who could localize the material, the magazines, digitize them, and they are now available for us to make our research. And I had the luck to visit New York in 2018. And there I asked around if they have somebody material about Malfono Naum Faiq. And I had the luck, thanks to Yaqro Afram Qawme and Inos Chammo, who I visited, and they gave me a lot of these material you can see here in original. On this package, this was the original poverty of Malfono Naum Faiq. So I have them now in my home, and I digitize, of course, first of all, every material I received. So this, in short, about his writings. Of course, just one word or one sentence. We have a lot of material which is still lost. We knew about books which were published, but we don't know where they are. At least 3-4 books they are still missing, but we know surely that they were published at that time. Yeah, so far.
Yeah, so not much information is out there, it seems, or books written about Naum Faiq. And one of the major reasons that we have you here is that you yourself released a book last year written in Arabic about Naum Faiq. Can you give us an overview of what that book contains? And as a follow-up, do you plan further books on the topic itself?
Yes. I originally started not to write a book in Arabic. My aim was to start a book in German and then later in English, and not a book with directly translating original articles or transcripting original articles. My aim, and this is still my project I'm working on, this is only the basis for that, is to write a book about the time of Naum Faiq, about the thoughts of Naum Faiq. It's very important to know his connections to associations of that time, personalities of that time. So this will be the main book I am planning for. This is but book number 4 or 5 what I'm talking about. So the first book is this one. This is the Arabic book. I released it last year. We transcribed all Arabic articles of Malfono Naum Faiq from the Gershuni Arabic to the Arabic letters of today. So it is now accessible to much more readers, so they can read about his thoughts. And also it's important to see, I talked about the persons of his time. I put also a lot of articles of other writers who wrote in his magazines. So just to get an view or an image, how did they thought about our people? It's a good source for, especially for the SEPA or SEIFO, to get deeper how they get the information in the US. For example, the death of, or the murder of Ashur Yusuf, firstly, at the beginning of 1917, we read about that in the US. That means more than 1.5 years after he was assassinated or murdered in Turkey. So this is, as I said last year, this is the first book, 350 pages for Arabic readers. I recommended it. It's a very, what I said, history or living history, we can say. You can feel how this man was sick for his nation. So what is in total, I didn't count them, the articles, but I think over 120, 110 original articles which we transcripted to the modern Arabic. I put also some poems in Arabic, as he wrote them in Arabic, it's not translated to Arabic, and also 7 eulogies of other writers about him, which were not part of Murad Chekre's book. Everything is new in this case. So talking about projects, this one is, I'm not directly involved, but I am aware about that, and I get also the results of this work. My colleagues, my friends, Jan Bessawa in Sweden and Aydin Aslan in Belgium, they are working for 2 books. They are transcripting now the Ottoman Turkish to the Latin letters, as you can see here in on this slide. So the first book should be published this year, and the next one, I think, next year will be published. So from my side, I'm trying to publish the German book, the German version of the Arabic book, but it's not a one-to-one copy. It's more than the Arabic one, because I will translate Syriac articles. Also Ottoman Turkish articles I will translate to German, and this will be the basis for the English book then. I hope then next year maybe. And then, as I said, my main book will be started afterward, one in German and one in English. So at the end we have then 5 books from my side about Malfono Naum Faiq. So, and one book I have to mention, it's already announced in the media or on the social media. It's a book edited by my friend Thomas Bet Abdallah. He put all Syriac articles and poems of Malfono Naum Faiq in this book. I think there are around 500 pages of his writings. It's very good source also for who can read the Syriac in this case. Yes, this short to my projects, the upcoming projects.
Very good. We cannot wait for that, especially us here who are only going to be reading the English version, I'm sure, and that will be amazing when it does come out. Naum Faiq has been regarded as one of the fathers of Assyrian nationalism. And as you know, as a nation, as a community, diaspora and everywhere, we have many internal debates within our nation. One topic that receives extensive attention is in regard to the name of our people. What was Malfono Naum Faiq's opinion on this matter? And again, this is from the time about 100 years ago or so. Where did he stand on that topic?
Yes, maybe before I get deeper in this issue, I live in Germany, and I also had, of course, a view in the history of Germany. If you go back 150 years, only 150 years in the German history, you will see that they had, I think, 150 states within Germany. and maybe, I don't know, 30 or 40 different names like Saxonia, Bavaria, Borussia, and even now today, you say German to them, they say Deutsch to themselves, yeah. And we have also other names for them, but living in Germany within Germans, they don't have any problems with this issue. They accept that and they have no problem with that. Just only as an introduction for our ongoing discussion, we are discussing 3 or 4 names at the end, not 30 or 40 like the Germans, but we are still, what to say, yeah. Good. For Malfono Naum Faiq, he was a universal thinker. That means you will see in his writings all names are present, and I will display some places from his articles where he used the different names. So starting from one of the earliest writings from the 4th issue from Kawkab Madenho. Here you can see the image is the original from Kawkab Madenho in Garshuni Ottoman Turkish. On the left side, you can see the transcription, and below is then the English translation for that. So in Turkish, he is talking about Athuri and Arami. That means it's clear for us now, Assyrian or Aramean. And he says, as you can read here in English, that it's difficult for a people to make a separation between 5 separate names or churches or sects, you can say. And he lists them. He said Syrian Orthodox, Nestorian, Chaldean, Syrian Catholic, and Maronites. He counts also Maronites to the Assyrian nation at the end. So this is one sample. The next sample also from Kawkab Madenho. Here we have I think it's a poem. He said, wake up, Suryaniler in Turkish. And he continues with Asuriler. So he says, Suryaye or Atouraya at the end, or Syrians. Of course, if we say Syrians now, everybody thinks about the residents in Syria, not about us. Yeah, but for him, it was a synonym, Syrians and Assyrians. One more example now in Arabic for the participants who can read Arabic. Here, I will switch to the next. This is the translation. So here he says, he starts with the Assyrian homeland, Al-Athuri in Arabic he wrote. Then he speaks about the Aramean inhabitants, Al-Aramiyun. And then he continued with then Al-Suryan, Syrian inhabitants. So for him, in one short article, you can see in 2 paragraphs, he used 3 names without any problem. This is again the Arabic one. So this picture, you can see 4 gentlemen. In the center is Bishop Ephraim Barsom, Syriac Orthodox bishop at that time of Syria. Then you have behind him is his secretary, and we have Reverend Jewel Warda and Dr. Abraham Yusuf from the US. They were participants at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. And here he wrote an article for them as motivation. And in this poem, he wrote what I marked here with the red line, let the eyes of the Creator be on you, O sons of Aram. Yeah? And he continued then, the hope of all Assyrians, Atouraya, rests on you. So again, in one small poem, you can see both names. And by the way, he is mentioning here freedom for the house of Shamiram. Yes, in this poem. Another sample is also a poem. He starts in the first line. He says, "Tau kul Atouraya, come all Assyrians, Atouraya." Then in the second marked line, he says, O members of the race of Aram and children of Shamiram. And then on the other side, wake up Assyria. Athir, Athir, Athur. So for Naum Faiq, the name issue was not an issue. We have only one article. This is the whole article you can see here, where he discussed this question. And at the end, he says, in our language, we should use Atouraya, and in English, Assyrian, for the name of our people. In other place, you don't find any article where he discussed this issue. It was not an issue at that time, in my opinion. So again, about the language, the name of the language, because if we say today Assyrian language, many of our people are angry because they said it's not Assyrian, there is no Assyrian language, there is no Syriac language. The other side will say, no, it's Aramean what we speak. This is a sample of Naum Faiq, what he thought about the language, the name of the language. So he said, on the first place, Leshono Dilan Suryoyo, Suryoyo Suraya. Then in another magazine, he said, Leshono Dilan Orumoyo, Aramaya. Then in another language, another magazine, Younadam, Leshono Dilan Othuroyo, Assyrian. And in Turkish, he said, İşte bunun içinde bu biz Athuri lisanımızın. I don't know what it means at the first part, but the last part I understand that. That means Assyrian language, Athuri, Asuri. Yeah. And the last slide for this issue is the header of his magazine, Beth Nahrin. There you can see in English, he said the Assyrian paper. And as a working title in each magazine, he wrote, Millat Velisan Vewatan Asuri. That means Assyrian nation, language, and homeland. This was his view. But again, he was not that stubborn as we are today. So I wished we could stop the clock 100 years and then go on with this issue. Yeah. So far for the name issue.
Yeah, a very interesting approach for us today. You're very correct of how Malfono Naum Faiq approached the name issue, which, to your point, wasn't truly an issue as it is today. But maybe we can take a little bit from that and move forward with it. Malfono Naum Faiq was regarded, obviously, as the first, if not one of the first, to preach unity among our people, even writing in Hoyodo. What was this unity concept? What were the steps that he defined that were needed to achieve this? Does he explain that, and do you have more information about that?
Well, the concept I will present to you isn't written like this by Naum Faiq. It's my analysis of his thinking, of his writings. So he repeats himself very much in many articles. So that's why I assume that he thought this way about Younadam or the union among our people. There are four main points who says that we need this to create unification or union among our people. First of all, the language. The language, he says, we have to unite the language or unify the language, preserve our language, clear up our language. And I will show you some samples where he said, wrote that. Here it's one article from Younadam. He said here, without unity of language, there is no unity of ideas and thoughts. At the end, he is right. If we can't understand each other, so how can we have the same ideas or exchange ideas at the end? Of course, today we speak English, but in general speaking, for a nation, it will be for his time, it was a must to have as a nation in our own language. So here it's a poem where he say any nation that does not learn, know, and read its language, it's not known as an ethnicity. and at the end does not deserve to be called a nation. This for the language. He tried from himself to educate the eastern side. So if we speak together, you will say it, litla peda. Naum Faiq would say, peda isn't an Assyrian word. You have to use yuthrana, or azaduta. It should be khiruta, and so on. He lists not only he and Younadam, but also in Beth Nahrin before this magazine, he wrote many articles with this issue, that the Eastern Assyrians have to clarify or throw the foreign words to be closer to the Western part. That means to the Ktobonoy, to the Syriac, and then to unite this language. By the way, just talking about the language, Malfono, Naum Faiq, and Diyarbakir in general, they don't spoke Surat, although the spoken languages. They spoke Turkish. Some of them maybe Armenian, no Armenian, but they didn't spoke at home Syriac or Assyrian. So this is also important to know why the generation after Naum Faiq was completely assimilated. Yeah. So, and as sample to that, he wrote extra in his magazines with Eastern scripture, Syriac in Eastern scripture, because he wrote that clearly, that he wrote in this language for his East Assyrian readers. And in Huyodo, you can see he wrote the same article in both scriptures. You can see a sample here, one in Eastern scripture and one in Western. It's the same article. So just to display the unification of the language. Then the next point is education. For him, it was important, the media at that time were newspapers. So he missed always that we don't have enough newspapers, we don't have enough support from organizations, from people. And the second thing is schools, establishing schools, printing books, and before 120 years, speaking about that, emancipation, education of women. Yes, I read about this issue nowadays, still read about that. So for this point, also again, some sources or some original writings. Here we have from Beth Nahrin from 1916, where he say, strive for education and search for, or protect your language and search for Assyrian publications and books. And then here he wrote an article about the education of women. And here he wrote, educate your daughters because they can save our nation, because they are responsible for the children, to educate the children, to taught them the language, and therefore it's important to educate our daughters. Here again, another article, now in Syriac, Athto Syriato, Atta Syriata Amritula. Here we said, teach and educate your daughters again, in two different articles. And he cries always in many articles. We see Malfono Naum Faiq where he cries, where are our schools? Where are our newspapers, printers, writers? Where did they come today? She was always crying. You can hear his crying in his writings at the end, because he are missing all these things. The next point is secularism. This point was the same important or equal as the other points. He established a Ruth or Intibah Association in Diyarbakir back in 1908. The aim was for this institution to be a ruling body. That means a government at the end for, they thought at that time for in the millet system, but at the end, I will show you in the next slides that this was more than a cultural organization or something like that. Then separation of church and the nation. This is the main point. We still fight for that today, because if you ask many West Assyrians today, if you said, I am Assyrian, then they say, go to the Church of the East, they are Assyrians. So the brand mark Assyrian is for the Church of the East, not for others. And he was against that at that time already. Unification of political bodies and establishing of secular schools. I will display all this with samples. Talking about شو عروثه انتباه جمعيتي. It's very interesting that in 1910, yes, we are talking about 1910, 120 years, 10 years ago. These are the branches of Intibah association. They had 14 different sections. You can see here. And of course, many of these locations didn't exist more, not more with Assyrian population. If you see Siverak, Silvan, the Sa'ir, there are no Assyrians now. They are all murdered in Saifo. But at that time, they had branches of this organization. And if I mentioned only one number here, for example, the Mardin section had 300 members. 300 members at that time, it's a lot. I don't know if any organization here in the West now, among us, have 300 members. Yeah. So, and in the early time, in 1909, the section in New Jersey was founded by Jabur Boyaji, the name I mentioned already. And in America, there were a lot of sections of this organization. Here you can see the locations, but there are 3 locations in Providence, Worcester, and Detroit. And interesting here, 2 of these chapters were East Assyrians. So it was a mix of both sides. Yonkers and Elizabeth were purely East Assyrian sections. And so unification, you can see it in this organization already at that time. So some decisions or the thoughts or the structure of this organization, there was a general conference in 1910 in Diyarbakir, and I list only some decisions. He lists 20 decisions in Intibah and in Kawkab Madinho, and I only list here only 2-3 decisions where you can see what was the aim of this institution. One of the decisions is to create a directory of all inhabited and uninhabited churches and monasteries. So normally this task is an issue for the church, not for a secular organization. But in their thought that they are responsible for all issues of the nation. Then the next decision was to reactivate the printing press at Al-Zahfara Monastery. There was a printing press since 1880 in the monastery, but it was closed or because nobody was aware about that. So they decided that they will take it over, and they put monk Ephraim Barsom, who became later patriarch, to work on this press and print books, notebooks, and so on. Then this institution, this organization decided to introduce a constitution for the Syrian Patriarchate. So from outside the church, they decided to introduce a statute or a constitution for the church. So it's something unique. You can't discuss that today because it's no way to discuss such issues. Then talking about secularism and separation between church and nation. This is an article, very emotional article by Naum Faiq. He wrote about his time in Diyarbakir as a young man. He said, I felt very uncomfortable, as he wrote, because he saw that we Assyrians hate each other, excommunicate each other, and curse because of this difference of faith. So at the end, he said that the faith or the nature of God is an issue where man or mankind can't decide at the end, because it's something which should God decide at the end. Yeah. Again, the same article, he said, we fight each other, hate, kill, and curse each other because of the person, nature, and nature of our Lord Jesus. Yeah. And these are issues for which we are not responsible for that. Yes, and we can't resolve that. And again, in the issue of schools, he cried a lot of times in many articles for schools, opening schools and opening special schools. He says, he wrote, we need secular or non-religious schools. Yes, madrashote wa skole thonoye lo tawdi thonoye. He asked for that. And one of these schools came also to life with the orphanage in Adana, which was very important for the further development of the idea of a nation. So, and the last point of his concept is the homeland. For him, a nation, or the Assyrian nation, including different churches. Beth Nahrin was the name of the homeland for them. Some of them, they had a map. They presented a map for the Paris Peace Conference, for example. But at the end, Beth Nahrin was the name. Even Dr. Abraham Yusuf said that they are convinced that the name of the land, of the country they will achieve, they hope for that, will be Assyria, the name. Yeah. So, and he, Naum Faiq, counted on the cooperation with superpowers, especially Great Britain. The USA was not that match player in the First World War in the region. It was much more Great Britain and French. At the time of Mar Binyamin Shamoun, we read Naum Faiq asking for support, Mar Binyamin Shamoun, to defend our people. And he always asked for financial support for widows and orphans and needy people in the homeland. So again, here again, some statements for this issue. Here you can read from 1916. Also the issue of the name you can see in this paragraph. He said that we call all our assigned to assign us to the Suryani name, Suryaya. And he says Nestorians, Chaldeans, Maronites, Syrian Catholics, Syrian Protestants, to the Assyrian unity, Ittihad Suryani or Al-Athuri. So again, he used at the beginning Suryani and ended at Athuri at the end. And then he says, because we are Assyrians in our roots, race, flesh, blood, language, and nation, and we have to create at the end the Assyrian nation, Umma Athuriya. Yes, Assyrian he used here. So, and here again, where he cried again, he said, stand up in unity and demand our homeland, Beth Nahrin. Yeah. And our first task is to create unity. This was already in 1960. Again, wake up, wake up. You can hear it or read it many times in his writings. Work, demand, speak, examine, and ask for help. Ask for help, that means from superpowers at that time, because he says already in 1917 that a new world map is drawn and we have to be ready for that. Yeah, we hear these words nowadays also, that the Near East is now moving and the new world map is coming, and we have to be aware, and we are not that aware, in my opinion. Again, he said, stand up for, or get up for, to claim our rights of our nation, and to ask for rights for our blood, our men, our properties, and our land. So he asks also here for reparations at the end of our land. So I think that's enough for this concept I could analyze from his writings.
Very, very interesting, Malfono Abboud. This is probably the most, and I think I speak for everyone probably who's on this Zoom, it's the most comprehensive collection of information when it comes to Malfono Naum Faiq. I myself have learned so much, and to your point just a bit ago, I think that those pillars that you laid out in those last slides, still something that we're working on, still something that needs to be achieved in many cases. As amazing as Malfono Naum Faiq was, I do feel as if there are many who are not aware of him, weren't aware of him maybe even prior to this lecture, or even prior to the internet coming around. One question that I've always wondered is why Malfono Naum Faiq isn't as well known to the broader Assyrian community as, say, one of his contemporaries who was alive during that time, of Freydun Atouraya, which so many others may at least have heard of the name, even if they don't know much of the history. Do you have any ideas about that?
Atouraya, believe me, even the West Assyrians who commemorate his what I said, remembrance every year, don't know much about Naum Faiq. I'm talking now about Naum Faiq first of all. Because as I said at the beginning, that there are a lot of materials which were lost at the end, and now we have them, and we have to present them to the public. But his name was still alive as a Malfono, or as a known personality for the unity of our people. But at the end, I asked in my lectures before writing my book, in all my lectures, just raise your hand, how many of you read an original article of Naum Faiq? So it's a very small number. At the end, maybe 1% or less than 1%. And if then it's only the book of Moderator, what I introduced at the beginning. So talking about Freydun Atouraya, of course, Freydun Atouraya is another pillar of our nation. No doubt about that. He's a martyr for our nation. You have to make a comparison, first of all, between Eastern and Western Assyrians again, regarding the literate rate of the people. So in Urmia and surroundings, I read somewhere that there were, around the year 1900, around 200 schools with around 5,000 pupils who were taught the Assyrian language, or the spoken language. So you East Assyrians, you are lucky that you introduced or you wrote your spoken language very early. So we are now, we West Assyrians, we are now in this process. These years, we are talking about how we should introduce our spoken language as a written language. So therefore, all the writings of Freydun Atouraya were written in Surith, the spoken language and the written language. So it was distributed among a large community at that time in the schools, the circles, the educated circles of Urmia and surrounding. So his heritage was still alive then. And don't forget, I make a short research for my main book, as I said, in the magazines in the time of Naum Faiq. And one of these magazines is Kukhwa. And this magazine, there I found many writings of Fredun Atouraya. These are some, for example, 3 articles of him. Manine Suryayo Dahi Ki Peshi Muqamta Umtan. Yeah. أو قبنونة آتور سلوتة ملة. This is a poem of Rabbi Fredun Atouraya. So also about via this channel, his writings were distributed, and the readers were again Eastern Assyrians, because Western Assyrians, they are a lot or more illiterate than Eastern Assyrians. Even as I said, Malfono Naum Faiq didn't spoke to Royo. He was very excellent in Syriac, in Klobonoyo, but he was very admired by the Turabdin people because they were aware to preserve their dialect till that time. So, and don't forget that Fredun Atouraya also established, I will not say the first political party, because as I presented the Intibah organization, if you think about their decisions and their thoughts, if they will take aware about the church, about the schools, about the language, so they are taking care about the nation at the end. So in my opinion, it's that also a kind of a political party. But at the end, with Seifo, with the genocide, all members were died out, and however, Assyrian Socialist Party counts as the first political party among our Assyrian people. I'm fine with that, it's okay. It was founded by Rabbi Fredun Atouraya in 1917 with other persons. And we have also the Ormia Manifesto of a United Assyria, also written by Fredun Atouraya. And these issues, and nowadays we have also movies about his life, for example. So this is the difference between Fredun Atouraya and Naum Faiq we can see. Talking about the knowledge of East Assyrians about Naum Faiq, I found this article in 1954 in the Gilgamesh magazine in Tehran. There you can read an article about Naum Faiq. I think the author is in West Assyrian, Jamil Shakir Al-Qan. I think he is from Turabdin, who wrote this article. But at the end, it was published in an East Assyrian newspaper in Iran and distributed adequately at that time. So these are the connections we had. But at the time of Naum Faiq, he had very close contact to his East Assyrian brothers, like Jewel Warda, for example, but he has also a lot of direct contact with Paulus Nvia from Chicago, who was the editor of Mshahdana Atouraya. So we have also some articles addressing Paulus Nvia. So this is my answer of these questions. I think we have maybe to make more analysis about that. But this is so far from my side. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have more questions, I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Malfono, Abboud, Zeitoune. For the folks in attendance, there is a chat option, and please feel free to ask any questions through the chat. I will relay those messages to Malfono, Abboud, Zeitoune. We will have one of our moderators gather those up and send to me while we are here. Malfono, one question, since you've written the book, it's been a year since you've written your book. Obviously, there's more information that you've probably gathered, and I'm sure those who have read it have given you information back. Have you seen a fairly large uptick in the interest in Malfono Naum Fike after you've written that book, and what new information have you been gathering that will possibly be in the new iterations of this book, whether it's in English or in German. Is there anything that came as a surprise to you that you wish you had added in the first book that wasn't added?
Yes, the what do you mention that? How do you said that at the beginning? The light or the I didn't get the English wording you used, but because you are inviting me, this is a sign that people are interested in this work. So thank you for that. No, in general, I am presenting something new to the people. At the end, it's new, but if you read the articles, you will say, what happened the last 120 years? Nothing, yes. And asking about the quantity the books I sold, I will say our people don't read books. I'm not disappointed. I'm not disappointed. I was awaiting that. At the end, I sold 200, 250 books, yes. But this is normal. I know that I have my experience from my music books that if I wouldn't make my tower in different cities and countries, I would maybe also sell 200 books at the end. So this is not the questions, but I think through my lectures, the last 3-4 lectures where I displayed these interesting parts of his writing, people are very interested in this issue. Yeah.
We do have a few questions, and I'll read a couple to you here.
Okay.
Well, first and foremost, just a general question about the slides. Are those available on your website, the slides? Where can people view the slides if they ever needed to?
No, this is my own presentation. You could see, because these parts, the English translation, for example, this will be in the English book printed at the end. The Arabic is already published, and so at the end, this is only my working instrument for such lectures. Yeah.
To the person that asked that question, actually, we have recorded this, so we will be posting this.
So at the end, this is public, yes.
And they can absolutely see that.
Yes.
We have a question from Rich Ghazal. Said, I noticed there were no Untitled chapters located in Hakkari. Why do you suppose that is, that there was nothing in Hakkari at the time?
Yes, they wrote very exactly about these issues, about their meetings, their reports. So that's why we know how many chapters they have. Hakkari, I have to say that the contacts, especially in the homeland, between East and West Assyrians were very limited due to the geography. I think there were less contacts as in the US. Yes, this is my opinion. I'm not sure about that, but I think it was the reason. Yeah.
Another question here from Zeitoune Sadi. What was the reason Malfono Naum Fike migrated to New Jersey in the first place? I believe it was in 1912.
Yes. The reason we read about that newly, I will say, it was in a speech of Lutfi Boyaji after he was died in Naum Faiq in the ceremony. He wrote, it's written in Murad Chakka's book, in Gershuni, Ottoman Turkish, and now we transcribed that. We know what he wrote that time. There was an incident in 1910 already. There was a celebration of peoples in Diyarbakir, and there Naum Faiq participated with a group of young people where they sang his songs, and he gave a speech there, and he said there that this region is Beth Nahrin, and this belongs to the Assyrians at the end in the history. And afterwards, this speech, some of his colleagues, an Ottoman colleague, came to him and tell him that his life is in danger because he spoke that. Yes, and of course he was there 2 years. He published his magazine, and then in 1912 he quit, he left Turkey. But this is an incident where it's written, because this event was reported in the Intibah magazine. It was a large event because there were six different peoples there in this event. And in this speech, in this article of Lutfi Boyaji, we read about this, about that. This is one of the reasons. And at the end, Naum Faiq had his friends in New York and New Jersey, and so the connection was there. And he was supported also not only via contact, he was supported by financial support from Jabbour Boyaji from the US already for his Kawkab Manhu magazine. And maybe it's another issue if I talk about that later. But his friends, for example, Bashar Helmi Buruji was his name. He was killed in Saifo, and many people around him were killed after him. So it was good that he left Diyarbakir on time.
Yeah, yeah, we would have lost so much more possibly if he had stayed.
Yeah.
There was a question from Adessa. From Naum's writings, do we have a sense of how our people were feeling when it came to identity and nationalism prior to him taking on a prominent role in developing our modern Assyrian nationalism? So, you know, what was I guess, the consensus of our people when it came to the identity and nationalism prior to Naum
I think
Fike?
I answered this question in his unity concept. They had a lot of gatherings, east and western part, in Yonkers, for example. For example, there was a ceremony after the murder of Mar Binyamin Shamoun. He wrote 2 articles about that ceremony, where he and the priest from the Syriac Orthodox Church attended with, I think, 7 or 8 persons of that time, like Sanharib Bali and other persons. So they celebrated the mass, the funeral in New York with the other parts of the Assyrian nation. He wrote, he addressed many articles to, as I mentioned, to Paulus and Villa in Chicago. Yuval Warda was very known to him. They met a lot of times. You have pictures with them both together. For them, for that generation, the Assyrian sects were more closer together than today. Today we have the Chaldean nation, the Aramean or Syriac nation, the Assyrian nation, where each church began to establish their own nation. But at that time, it was common to say Assyrian for all. Even the church, the Syriac Orthodox Church, the name of that church in the US was Assyrian Apostolic Church, not Syriac or Syrian. The name change came in the 50s. And even the language, even in our language, they wrote the name of the church, Aito Shlihaitot Atouraya. Even in our language, they named the church Atouraya and not Suryaya there in New Jersey. So as I said, but as America is a melting pot, this was the main problem, that the generation after Naum Faiq, maybe the generation after the generation, is completely lost. So they are Americanized now. They don't have any connections to the Assyrian problems we have today. Yeah.
Okay. There's a few more questions, Malfono, that we're going to go through.
I have time here, no problem.
Good. Yeah, you're on lockdown. You can't go anywhere. We have you. So this is from Jesse Betzabdi. I apologize if I didn't say it correct, but I'm pretty sure I did. Question about the unification of the language specifically. Did Naum Fike mean speaking a specific dialect, East or West, or only in classical, or did unified mean each dialect, or unified that each dialect uses the words that are rooted in the classical?
His vision, as I said that already, because Naum Faiq himself in his field, he didn't speak Assyrian. He spoke Turkish, mostly Turkish. Mm-hmm. Even our people from Diyarbakir till today, they speak Arabic or because they migrated to Syria. His vision was a vision that if the eastern side tried to to throw out the foreign words, to adapt the classical Syriac words. And from the other side, the Assyrians, the West Assyrians, tried to learn the Klobonoyo, the classical Syriac, and then unified this language. This was his vision, of course. But at the same time, he was very proud about the East Assyrians, that they at least saved the scripture and spoke in this language, because he accused his Diyarbakir and Kharput Assyrians that they lost the language completely. He was proud of the Turabdin people because they spoke Turoyo, but at the end, his vision was to unify all the sections under the Klobonoyo or the Syriac, classical Syriac language.
And I think one of the other questions that came up, and it's actually later on, but I think it ties right into this, is why Malfono Naum Fike spoke so Turkish. What was the reason that he spoke other languages such as Turkish and not Assyrian as often as we would expect? And I assume it was to speak to the masses because most of the people understood that. But was there other reasonings?
No, as I said, because the whole community in Kharput spoke Armenian. So we have a lot of publications and books by Assyrians in Armenian, and even in Armenian Gershuni. That means they use the Armenian scripture and the Turkish language. So we have such books also. So Kharput, Armenian dominantly, and Diyarbakir was Turkish. Most of the people lost their language and they used only to speak Turkish together. So that's why now
much like us nowadays, where we're speaking.
We are speaking English now. Yeah, yes, right.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a question from Rich Lazad. We see that Malfono Naum Faiq used the various names throughout his writings, obviously, as you pointed out. Abboud, in your analysis, could you identify any common threads and in what particular context he used or intended to use each of those names? Was it random, or was it specifically when speaking about this subject, he would use this name and then tie it back in, or was it fairly random?
No, I think it was mostly random because as I displayed, he thought about, for example, the inhabitants. He spoke about the Arameans inhabitants, and later in the same sentence, about the Syrian inhabitants. Yes, and for the nation, he said in one of the samples I show you, he said the Umma Suryaniya or Atouraya, the Syriac or Syrian nation or Assyrian nation as equivalent. So it was interchangeably for him using these names. So I don't think that he was speaking from the perspective of today. Syrians in English was not common at that time because Syrian, the Malikite Orthodox Church used Syrian for themselves. That's why they didn't use the name Syrians, because Syrian, it was for them Syria for Naum Faiq. So he used always Assyrian, also in English. We have also a book for teaching children, or for a lessons book. He make vocabulary. He said Suryoyo is Assyrian again, yeah, and Atouraya means Assyrian again. For him, both the meaning is Assyrian. So there was no particular context for each name. He used them interchangeably.
Yeah, and I think what the common thread, at least from what you were presenting that I had seen, was that always at the end, it would always come back to Assyrian in some way, whether he was using Aram or using another. Anyway, there was always the inclusion of Assyrian, whereas it might not include the other names at certain points in his writings. It always did include Assyrian in there, it seems.
Yes, by the way, it's a little funny maybe if I tell you this story. Among the East Assyrians, the name Suryaya, it was more common than Atouraya. Even I found one magazine or one author, also from New York. The name of the magazine was Raya, the shepherd. He wrote at that time that he said, it's very funny, really funny, as I read that it was in Eastern Assyrian written. He said, we are Syriac Aramaic. So you are Syriac Aramaic, I am Assyrian now. So see how the world turns on in 100 years. So at the end, if we think as Naum Faiq thought at that time, we are very happy with that we have to accept, to have this richness of these names. That's good. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Very much so. But we have a few questions coming in, and I think this is specific to the area. Seems Jesse, but Zabdi may know the area a little bit better than us, but asked about the state of Naum Faiq's house in Diyarbakir that is still around. It seems that it is in bit of ruins. Or do we know if there's the ability? Obviously, with the Turkish state, it's probably difficult. But is there any plans to rescue that? It seems like stones have been removed. I mean, I don't know what the status is, but I would assume that it's there's not much that can be done.
This is an old discussion about this house and also about his grave, by the way, taking his grave to the homeland. I'm not sure. I would say I walked beside his house in New Jersey also. He lived there also. So of course, in Diyarbakir, it's rooted in the homeland, of course. But at the end, what I said, I'm not in this issue about this, sure, his house. Yeah, I know that the owner of this house won't sell it, and I don't know. I'm not deep in. Mm-hmm. Sorry for that.
Right. No worries at all. We do have a question here from Rain Henna, who says, Shalom Abboud. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, and many thanks to AACO for organizing. Thank you, Rain. What steps do you think we can take as a community to promote greater awareness of important historical figures in modern Assyrian history, like Malfono, Naum Faiq? And then how can we help make this information and content more accessible to folks?
Yes, this is also an outcry from me. We have Mara, or we had Mara, but unfortunately, if you search for Mara, you can't find Mara now because it's closed at the end. We need financial support for such an archive. I know personally people where we can find such old material we have to scan to rescue, because I'm sure after 5 or 10 years, this material is lost. But at the end, we don't have an organization, we don't have financial support to send people, to pay people at the end, because this person have to live at the end, to make these journeys, to scan, to archive such issues. So we don't have that institution today. It was a good start with Mara for 2-3 years. And the main job was done by Thomas, who traveled all around the world and scanned a lot of material, but not everything. Of course, we have a lot material left, and we know where this material is. And my outcry again is to establish such an institution, to first of all search for such old material, digitize them, and preserve them at the end with digitization. And this is the most help we need for this issue, speaking in general, not only for Naum Faiq. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, I think funding has been an issue for our nation in general for many of these things.
We are, just for information for the members here, I am also responsible, the managing director for the Mor Afrem Foundation here in Germany. And we have ongoing talkings or discussions with Mara to take over Mara and to finance Mara and to reactive Mara. We are in this discussion, but of course, also our sources are limited. So if we have 3-4 other organizations who will support in this issue, that would be great. Yes, and we are open for this discussion.
It's a very important undertaking. Yeah. Absolutely, for the entire nation, for the future. It's a legacy we must leave behind for everyone. A question here from Gabby Wanisian. Taudisegi Malfono. My question is, what is your favorite work of Naum Faiq that you have encountered and why?
Favorite, this is a very different question. I was also asked, I wonder why this question don't came so far here, about Malfono, Naum Faiq and Zeitoune. I was very, what I said, this article he wrote about Zeitoune at that time in 1960 in Arabic, 16 in Arabic. This is very heartbreaking article about the children, the widows, the death. This article, I read that also in one of his commemorations, the whole article. This is one of the articles I said that was very heartbreaking article I read, yes.
I'm sure that you had come across also some information that you didn't know. And you had mentioned that you met some of his, or contacted some of his descendants, I believe. How was that interaction with the descendants that you had with Naum Faiq's, I guess, great-grandchildren at this point, it would be?
Unfortunately, only one of them, I'm not sure if she is also attended this lecture because I invited her to this lecture. She lives in Florida now. She is the great-granddaughter of Naum Faiq, and also her mother is alive. They make a short video for me for my book launch last year. I was very happy about that. And unfortunately, the only thing she could help me was to complete the family tree of Naum Faiq till today. On the other side, he had two daughters, as I said. The other side, I'm in contact with one of his, again, great-granddaughter, but unfortunately, I didn't get any information so far. So there are a lot more and more Americanized. They know this is one of their grandfathers, but they don't know and don't have any information about him.
Well, so if they are, yeah. Hello to them.
And one incident I can talk about here, maybe. While I was searching for Naum Faiq, I found one of the posts of his grandchildren, and he asked somebody to write the name of Naum Faiq in Arabic to make a tattoo on his shoulder in Arabic. So I was astonished. Naum Faiq wouldn't ever use Arabic letters for his name. Yes.
Very ironic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a question here from Salim Kirilmas, and I'm going to shorten it up here. But first, he thanks you obviously for the great presentation of Malfono Abboud Zeitoune. He wanted to know if you could share any influences that Malfono Naum Faiq had that were Assyrian or non-Assyrian, ideological and philosophical contemporaries of the time, who had influenced kind of his thought when it came to conceptualizations of the nation, secularism, ethnicity, and so on and so forth.
Yes, we have to know, I'm speaking from today now, just to understand how Assyrians think. Even in this war in Syria, you will find many Assyrians who demonstrate for Bashar al-Assad. Yeah? Only to have the power to support the power. And a similar situation we see at that time in the second constitutional era of the Ottoman Empire. It was 1908 was declared, and the people, not only the Assyrians, although the Armenians were very happy about this declaration because that means there is a lot of freedom for the peoples and so on, and they were very happy about that. And so they supported this movement at the beginning. But we know now that 2-3 years later, it was the other side, that the Young Turks did the massacres and so on. But at the beginning was this freedom they get from the Sultan, from the Ottoman Empire. And of course, the environment, the Armenians were one of the sample. There were a lot of things steps ahead. For example, creating music bands. Yes, we have such a sample that the Assyrians started a music band in 1910, and then this is reported in Intibah. The Assyrian people, make a claim or against this band in front of their bishop. That this is not our culture or not our thing. We have, and at the end, the bishop stopped this band. So my assume is that Naum Faiq took a lot of his thinking, because the environment, the Diyarbakir was a melting pot of many peoples. A lot of peoples live there and still live there, and so they took a lot of ideas from each other. But he was very what I said, intelligent in this case, Naum Faiq. So I get, as I was in New York, one of a translation of a French play or theater, who Naum Faiq translated from French to Ottoman Turkish of course in Syriac scripture in Gershuni. So at the end, although the French Revolution, this was not so far, it's for 100 years before, this influence was still there also. At the end, in the sum, there was of course an influence of the surrounding people, and also the time was the time of nations, the uprising of nations. So, and we as nation, we was also in that time, and Naum Faiq was one of the first. Not only him, it was also Ashur Yusuf who thought the same, who was in Kharput in this case then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very true.
Maybe a short answer.
Good answer. I mean, I think you bring up a great point that it was many births of many nations were coming around that time, and there was opportunity and there was hope that was probably springing as well, and all of that coincided with the, with a fervent nationalism that was being seen, and pretty much siloed each and every ethnicity in their own type of mentality in that regard. There is a question here again from Jesse Betzabdi, who was wondering if Malfono Naum Faiq had, due to his focus on secularism, I would assume, did he have any enemies within the church? He mentions he was a Shamosho Vengeloyo, one of the highest ranks, and then at the same time he preached nationalism. Could be risky in the Syriac Orthodox Christian Church today, he says, but during that time, seems that the church didn't have much problems with the synonyms. But he was wondering, were there any issues, some pushbacks? I guess going back to in 1910 when you mentioned that they went to the bishop about the music, right? And they said, this is not what we do. Was anything like that occurring? Was the church feeling any type of animosity possibly towards Malfono Naum Faiq because of his views?
In general, Naum Faiq was a respected person within the church. So you can think if his institution, the Intibah, wants to organize the church. Yes, they wanted to pay the clergy. They want to make a directory of all churches and monasteries. The church is, by the way, the church was the institution which after his decease, who made his commemoration every year, but till the 50s was the church, and then it was more and more the civil organizations like Takasta, AACO, and nowadays the institutions here in the West like our federations and associations. But the church, speaking for the church, in only one person, I think I'm not angry about him, but I am astonished, I'm surprised how he changed his mind about Naum Faiq. It's nothing else, less than Patriarch Ephraim Barson. In that time, back in Diyarbakir, he was one of the main persons in the Intibah movement. And also in the Paris conference, he was one of the spokesmen for the Assyrian nation. Even the name Assyrian, he used the name Assyrian also. But afterwards, if you read his book, Berul Ebdire, scattered pearls. There is only a small entry about Naum Faiq. He said he was a shamosho, a diacon in our church. He wrote some poems and books or something like that, very short. So from that side, I was disappointed from Afrem Barson because he knew very well what Naum Faiq did. But enemies, I wouldn't say enemies, because even in his time in Diyarbakir, in one of his introductions, in one of his music books or poems books, he wrote about the necessity of music and singing. He said, many of our people punished me because I am introducing music to our people. And by the way, he is maybe the first one who put Syriac words to music. Yeah, of course, it's not his own composition of the music. He took from the church or from other people, but he was the first. Older songs we don't have, or melodies. He wrote that people were accusing him doing that, but he said no. Music is important to motivate the people for their nation. Short answer. Jesse.
I think Jessie, she had a great question there, and I think it's still something that we see now a lot, is trying to balance that secularism within the nation.
I saw one more question from Jessie. I want to answer that question. You didn't saw that.
Absolutely.
It was her question about how we can join our forces with other like Thomas and the others who are working on this field. Just believe me, Jesse, we are one team. So we are aware. The book of Thomas, I have the draft since 2018 here. So I have it since 3 years now. So we are very aware of our works, each other. And even the work of Aydin and John, I was the reason that Aydin started to transcript the articles, because I gave him, first of all, as a test, because I still need people who can help me. This is we need people who can transcript such issues. So I started with Aydin, and he's the best till now, as I can say, because I tried other people too. And there he started, and John came into the group, and then they both decided to publish this book. So at the end, we are one team. We are not separate authors.
Very good. I don't know if we have any other questions. It doesn't look like we do. Malfono, this has been one of the most enlightening lectures I have moderated, absolutely, and attended. And I can only, I can wait with bated breath, as they say, for the book to come out in English. If someone were, yeah.
By the way, mentioning English, it's again my outcry. I need help for English for sure. I will try my best. I don't know how is my English, by the way?
It's just very honest, amazing, and I'm so happy we're having this conversation.
That's okay, thank you. No, but I need the help for proofreading of articles I translate from then German or from Arabic or from other languages to English. That I need the help from people who are more deeper in this language to just have an overview of that. So every helper is welcome.
I think we will have no trouble in finding that.
Thank you very much.
Happening. We have, many of us do have a fairly wide network of individuals, especially that are very fluent.
I forget she write it now. I forget Jessie for her design for my book. Thank you, Jessie, here again.
That's very good. Beautiful design. And with that design and those books and all your books, actually, where can people purchase those? Where would they be able to purchase those books from?
Well, I have own website. It's my first and last name, abboudzeitoune.com, and there is a shop, and then you can order your books there.
And we will share that as well on our social media pages, as well as emailing to our members and letting them know We obviously have two of your books. I think I mentioned this. We have those. I'm sorry, one of your books in the universities here in Arizona. When the other, when you do come out with the English Naum Fike book, we can't wait for that. And when that does happen, well, I'm sure we will take the same approach here as well. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to thank you, Malfono, Abboud, Zeitoune, Talisek. It was an amazing, amazing lecture. We are all coming out of this more knowledgeable. I think much more focused on what we can do and what we have been missing out on possibly for the past 100 years, or as long as Naum Fike has not been with us.
Yes, also from my side, thank you very much. Assyrian American Cultural Organization of Arizona.
It's a mouthful.
Long name. And also I forget SAFO Center. I saw they distributed this an announcement. Thanks to them too. I'm happy to that you're having me here. Thanks to all attendants. It was an international attendance today from all around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Dalio Tobo. Ramsho Khuntawa.